This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Itai Kalegi. Crazy to think spring is approaching. We only have 3 months remaining in this school year. And in light of that, and with spring break approaching, we're doing a special double-length edition today. We have 5 segments jam-packed, an hour-long show, and we have a lot to get to. We will start as I'll be talking to Mayor Busch about all the latest in Metuchen in regards to COVID-19 and how the latest federal relief bill will impact the Brainy Borough. Then we'll debut the Coach's Corner with help from Ben Selesky and Jada Victor Morse from the Metuchen High School Media Club. With the Bulldog Report, I'll be talking to Coach Keagle about the upcoming wrestling season and how it's different from past years. Then after the commercial break, we'll start with all the latest in sports as Josh Hyman and I will recount all the action from the basketball season, preview wrestling, all the latest in swimming and track, and some of the other spring sports on the way. Then we'll be joined by Mr. Stevens, a computer science and math teacher, to talk about teacher appreciation and all the various things that teachers have had to do this year to adjust and change from normal life, and how these changes, some of them, could stay and impact school in the long run, even after the pandemic concludes. And finally, we'll be joined by Itai Geller. Itai and I will be talking about more about in-person school and online school, some of the best parts of it, some of the tough parts of it, and how we can continue to make through these last 3 months of this very unique school year. But before all that, let's head into our announcements now with Julia Hirschfield.
Thank you, Eddie. This senior class group photo will be taking place on Tuesday morning, April 6th. All students should arrive at the MHS Stadium at 9:30 a.m. and wear a mask. The rain date is April 7th. Due to the cancellation of final exams, waiting for the 3rd and 4th marking periods have changed. All of this information can be found on the school website under the News tab. Finally, a reminder that next Friday, March 26th, is the last day before spring break. We will return to school on Monday, April 5th. That's all for announcements. Back to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Julia. Now let's move into our interview with Mayor Busch. It has officially been over a year since the coronavirus pandemic first started here in America and the world, and vaccinations are coming and things are getting better, it seems like. Of course, there's still an issue and there's still an importance of safety. So to talk about all the latest here, it's great to be joined right now by Metuchen Mayor Jonathan Busch. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Eddie, thanks for having me.
So lately, how have coronavirus cases in Metuchen been trending?
So, not great, actually. We've got we had 7 cases just yesterday, actually 8 if you include one that was added today relative to yesterday. Sometimes the cases take a little while to shake out because the reporting is off. But we had 8 cases yesterday. We had 6 cases the day before. We're between 30 and 40 cases a week right now, which is what we're averaging, which is really astounding considering the vaccines have picked up. We got reports earlier this week that as of March 9th, at least 1 shot of the vaccine has been given to 18.1% of borough residents. And that obviously includes the percentage of 100% includes children who wouldn't be eligible, for example, the vaccine. So it's a much higher number of the overall population eligible for the vaccine. That's the 3rd highest in all of Middlesex County. And when you look at what we're comparing it to, we're comparing that number to Monroe, for example, which has an exceedingly large number of senior citizens who would be eligible for the vaccine. They were at, I think, 22%. And Cranberry, which is a much smaller town than Metuchen, believe it or not, there are lots of smaller towns than Metuchen in all of Middlesex County. We're just about middle of the pack. In Cranberry, they have about 19%. And I believe they have a lot of residents who would be eligible through the medical profession, because there's many people who live in that community who work with the Princeton medical community. So it's an amazing number in terms of vaccines. It's a discouraging number in terms of the number of people who are still testing positive for the virus. But there's this feeling and tremendous sense of optimism that we have that things are going to improve. Just hasn't quite happened yet.
Yeah, and of course, it's a steady improvement even as the vaccines start coming out and becoming more readily available. As you said, still only 18% have gotten that first vaccine here in Metuchen, much less the second. So it's still a long way to go. And of course, we're still in the early phases of the vaccinations coming out. But let's talk about the cases and people trying to prevent getting sick here in Metuchen. Now, I remember a few months ago seeing actually on your Twitter how certain things had been done downtown, such as installing these mask dispensers and more hand sanitizer dispensers downtown. How has those things been used, and are you happy with how that has impacted things in Metuchen?
So we've tried so many things to encourage people to do the right thing, and I think most residents, by and large, were really on board with the way we've been suggesting that they behave under the circumstances. It's very hard, obviously, to change your behavior, especially a year ago. We're now a year into this, and people generally know what to do. And if they don't, well, that's a hard thing to switch now. But I think that stuff was more intended to send a message about the importance of wearing a mask, of keeping yourself socially distant. It was bizarre because, believe it or not, our DPW would check the dispensers to see how often they'd have to refill them, and we realized that people were stealing them actually out of those mailboxes. So that didn't work particularly well, unfortunately. And you try things, and sometimes in government you try things just like in life that work, and sometimes they don't. So again, it was all about sending messages, but we certainly didn't expect that people would take the masks, and that was unfortunate. But again, you try these things, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't. And the one you just asked about in particular didn't really work too well.
And you mentioned, like, in government, always just trying things, and especially when we don't really have a precedent to try to base off this past year from. This is really something we've never seen before with a pandemic, much less in the era that we are in right now. But shifting gears to how this is impacting us high schoolers, of course, there have still been lingering issues with indoor gatherings, especially during the winter, with many teenagers that live in Metuchen. So how can you in the town try to continue to encourage Metuchen residents to follow safety guidelines as people nationwide begin to back down on their COVID-19 precautions?
Well, as the weather warms up, we expect that people will be able to spend, probably more practically speaking, some more time together. But again, just because you're outside doesn't mean the virus doesn't transmit. And this borough really learned that the hard way. I think it's fair to say, Eddie, that we started really dipping. Our numbers got very, very poor in December. In November, actually, we really started to see a rise, and then in December they just got worse. And really there was a period of time where we went from, I think in 1 week we went from like 28 cases to 16 in 1 week, but we're back up. So I don't really think that there has been much of an improvement through the year. My hope is that if the reason there's been such high transmissions, that people have been spending time with one another indoors, in personal, people, as they call, living room spread, I would hope that the concept of better weather would bring fewer cases. So I'm optimistic about it. I'm not, it's so hard in any position right now, whether it's government or whether you're a student or whether you are, running a business or, whatever the case is, making decisions for anything more than like a week ahead of time, because you're constantly gauging what's coming to you and trying to make decisions accordingly. So I will just say to you that I'm hopeful more than anything. But at this point, when it's a day like today, when it's raining out, as you can see behind me, or it's really cold, it's hard to suggest to people that they can spend time with each other outside. And some people just don't want to be told that they can't spend any time in person with one another. So you can only try so hard and preach so often. After a while, people get frustrated and they don't want to be spoken to once they're charged, if you will, of knowing what they're supposed to be doing according to our guidelines.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, I wanted to talk a little bit of policy, because 2 weeks ago, the House and Senate, they passed a groundbreaking $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. And regardless of any add-ons to the bill, there's obviously a lot of funding that will be available to help offset the financial burden of the pandemic for local municipalities and bigger cities alike. So how do you see this landmark legislation impacting things here in the Brainy Borough?
Well, it's tremendous. And I started the week on Monday, actually. I haven't talked to many people about this, so you're getting an exclusive here. I had a telephone conversation with Congressman Pallone, our member of Congress, who was preparing for his conversation with Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary, and we were proud to be able to serve as a resource to the congressman for that purpose. And there's many unanswered questions. So I'll start off with the negative. That being said, we are incredibly encouraged by the fact that the Congress has agreed to give Metuchen specifically, at least with respect to the municipality, approximately $1.4 million, in excess of $1.4 million. That money, as we understand it right now, cannot be used for tax relief. And again, what that means, we don't quite know. And the congressman was trying to help us figure that out. We've been working with the congressman all the way through this process as the Congress was grappling with this bill. The other part of this is that your school district, although you may not be here to benefit, right, Eddie? You're a senior this year.
Yeah.
Our school district is scheduled to get approximately $400,000, which was supposed to go for two pieces. One, for compensatory education, to provide kids with educational opportunity that they may not have had or maybe didn't make use of during the remote schooling, or just the fact that some parts of education may not have been able to be as robust as other times in our lives, right? Although our school district has done a tremendous job, in my view, under very difficult circumstances. And the second part is that it's supposed to be used to be able to prepare the schools for kids to return in September. Although I have a feeling that if things do improve, that our school district is in much better place to return, or at least to allow the return for those who are interested, especially the kids at Edgar and Campbell, to come back sooner than September full time, because our school district is in a very good position. We haven't seen spread in the schools. Families have been incredibly patient under the circumstances. We offer a full day of school, unlike most school districts. And so while there are issues with mental health, while there are issues with delivery of instruction, there always will be when you have changed circumstances like this. Our district has seasoned incredibly well under these circumstances, and much better prepared than many other school districts. And I can just say this because in my real job, I'm a school district attorney, so I represent lots of school districts. I've seen what lots of schools are doing, and I can't give enough credit to our teachers, our administration, our students, and our parents for putting the best foot forward under very difficult circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of work still to go. Of course, the negative, we have seen some more cases, but hopefully as the spring gets closer, vaccinations can rise and cases can go down, and we can hopefully start to approach a more normal summer and a more normal time after this crazy last year. Mayor Busch, thanks so much for joining us once again on the MHS podcast, and continued best of luck in your endeavors.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm optimistic. Appreciate your assistance in this, and I appreciate you reaching out and being so persistent for an interview. Thank you.
No problem. So let's move into our interview now with Coach Keagle of the wrestling team on the Coach's Corner. For the MHS Podcast, the Bulldog Report, and the Metuchen High School Media Club, I'm Itai Geller. After 3 long months of waiting, the high school wrestling season in New Jersey is set to begin next week. To discuss, it's great to be joined right now by MHS physics teacher and Metuchen High School wrestling coach Josh Keagle. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So before we talk about this season, I'd like to hear a little about your background in the sport. So how did you first develop an interest in this love for wrestling that you have now?
I think when I grew up, we played a lot of baseball and soccer. And we were introduced to wrestling in 8th grade middle school with some friends. They were going out for the team, so we gave it a try. And once I got to the high school, it was a nice camaraderie. There was a lot of passion. There was a lot of leadership on the coaching staff. Drew me to the sport, and really loved wrestling. Fell in love with it in high school. Eventually went on to wrestle in college at the College of New Jersey, and wasn't a star there, wasn't a starter, but I wrestled with a lot of great friends, a lot of great teammates, a lot of All-Americans, and was coached by Dave Eisenhower, who is one of the icons of wrestling in New Jersey, and went back to my hometown in Long Branch and taught and coached for 10 years. We had a lot of success there as a program, and made my way to Middlesex County, and here I am in year 4 for coaching wrestling.
Yeah, so let's talk about that process, because to my understanding, the wrestling program before your arrival here was sort of dwindling, and there were a lot of questions about its future, but now there's no more uncertainty. So talk about the process of becoming the head coach here at Metuchen High School and what you like most about the experience.
Yeah, so I got a year into teaching, and then my second year the position opened up, and it was meant to be, seemed like. And also it was meant to be because there was a nice group of kids who were 8th graders coming in as freshmen who are now our seniors. So my first year coaching was with 6 or 7 of our seniors right now, and they were our freshman class. And 4 years later, here we are with 7 seniors. 6 of them started with us as freshmen, and they've had a lot of success. They're a big part of our turnaround. And a lot of that is attributed to the Recreation Grapplers program that they were involved in when they were in elementary school and in middle school. And having that foundation and that feeder system was really essential to giving those kids an exposure to the sport, and then carrying them over. And the most enjoyable experience I have is just being around the kids every day, coaching, getting that energy, giving it to them, giving them the confidence, giving them the cheerleading, the encouragement, and seeing them grow.
So talking about this season now, of course, like any other sport this year, things are different. So how is your preparation for the season? Of course, you're about a week into practice. What is different this year, and what other changes are there to New Jersey wrestling compared to past years because of the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, so we had about a year-long off season. We were able to meet outdoors during the summer, which we did once a week. And then, we were preparing for to start in the winter, and we heard around Thanksgiving that it was going to be postponed and the new schedule would be starting in March. So all of fall, we were saying, hey, make sure you're doing things on your own, like running and lifting and staying in shape. And then it turned into all winter, hey, make sure you're running and lifting and staying in shape and staying active. And now here we are in March with a 2-week preseason. So some things that are different are we're doing some split practices. We have our beginner guys in the wrestling room, isolated a little bit, doing our beginner level stuff. And we have our experienced group wrestling in the main gym, rolling out some mats and doing their stuff. So we're isolated in 2 different groups, 2 different pods. That's number 1. And number 2 is we're not doing as much changing partners, switching around, so we're trying to isolate and things like that. As far as mask wearing, with most sports, we can take the masks off when we get into physical activity. And when we do our contact phase, we've broken up practice into 2 phases. Non-contact, which is running, stretching, line drills, agilities. And then when we work into our contact phase, then the kids have the option of taking the masks off. So we've done that, and we've tried to stagger, when are we wearing masks, when are we not wearing masks, what kind of pods are we in, breaking up the JV and the varsity guys. And as far as matches are, we're doing homeschool weigh-ins, so it's almost like an honor system, or we're doing a virtual weigh-in where we're not weighing in with the other team in the locker room. And there's no warm-ups before wrestling matches. You kind of show up to the school in your singlet, and then you step on the mat and you kind of start wrestling. So it's a little bit different that way. And we're also going to roll out 2 mats for the varsity matches, where out of the 14 weight classes, 7 of the matches are wrestled on one mat, 7 of the matches are wrestled on the other. And that's just to limit, that contact. So there's a lot of changes, some things. But wrestling in general, we've always been very hygiene conscientious. So we've always taken care of, making sure we're showering after practice, making sure we're washing our clothes daily. We have skin disinfectant wipes, those have always been in practice. So a lot of the practices that we take are continuing, they're just a little bit more highlighted.
Yeah, and definitely with wrestling compared to other sports, it's like the perfect combination almost you'd think about for coronavirus, being indoors and also being very high contact. But obviously with practices and also with the matches themselves, there's a lot of protocols and safety procedures that are taking place. But let's talk about this team this year. You guys had a really strong season last year. It's a little bit of an abbreviated season, pushed back, but you have a lot of returning seniors. What are your expectations for this year, and who are some of the wrestlers that we should really keep an eye on this season?
Yeah, in the last 2 years, we had almost 30 dual meet wins, which is amazing. To be close to 25, 30 dual meet wins in the last 2 years. And those wins were hard fought, and we did a lot of preparation to get there. We did a lot of off-season summer tournaments. We did our wrestling camps. We did our training sessions. And the expectations this year is to compete for a division title, as always. And mostly just to see that progression. You know, when you're wrestling and you're getting into that second and third and fourth year of high school wrestling, you should really see yourself come into your own. And this is the first year where we've had 4-year wrestlers. So last year, I didn't have a 4-year wrestler on the roster. This year I have 7 of them, or 6 of them, excuse me. So really, if we want to highlight our seniors, it starts with Jaden Kearns down at 120, and it goes into 145 for Tyler Haynes, both county place winners. 152 Brandon Kick, county place winner. 160 Kobe Williams, who took top 4 in the district. Excuse me, Karim Khan, 160, top 4 in the district. 170 Kobe Williams, top 4 in the district. Dean Serio is in the lineup as a senior this year. He'll be splitting time at 70-82. And those are really our seniors who have been in the program since freshman year or sophomore year, and they've given a lot of time to the sport, and they're going to see a lot of results. And normally in a regular season, I would say those 7 guys, those 7 seniors are looking to be district place winners, top guys in the region, top guys in the county. And I can't forget about Jake Lipinski, who's kind of in that mix right behind Tyler Haynes and a couple underclassmen who are really, really good. And if you look at a guy who's really a program kid, you look at a guy like Jake Lipinski, who's been here for 4 years, he works really, really hard, and he's going to contribute an enormous amount to our team. And just being a part of the system and trusting in the process and coming out year after year and day after day to see the progression, it's really tremendous.
Yeah, and you mentioned all these 4-year wrestlers. So many of these people, too, you're used to hearing as multi-sport athletes here. And I feel like especially this year with all the differences with the season, it's almost beneficial to already have that experience of playing a sport during the pandemic. And you guys certainly have an assortment of wrestlers who have done that. But last thing, I want to highlight one wrestler specifically, and that's Tyler Haynes, who I believe is finalizing a college commitment. So how does that make you feel as a coach, of course, someone who wrestled in college, and you've mentioned all these 4-year wrestlers, that they're not only able to grow here at Metuchen High School, but they're able to ascend and continue in college?
I think it means everything. I think it says a lot about the legacy and the tradition and where the program is going. Where a guy like Tyler Haynes can come into the program as a freshman, do all the right things for 4 years, have a lot of really good results, and enjoy the sport that much, be that passionate about it, feel that prepared and confident where he can say, hey, listen, I want to take it to that next level because I think I have the skills and the passion and the and really the destiny to become a better wrestler every day. So Tyler Haynes means a lot to us, and he's someone we'll talk about a lot in the future once he graduates. And we're going to talk about, hey, listen, people who come into our program, they go on to the next level. They go on to the next level because they're being taught a philosophy in terms of technique, in terms of work ethic, in terms of how to go about day-to-day life and how to go about a practice with a strong work ethic, with integrity. And when you go into a college wrestling room, to have that background, to have that backbone, and to be able to say a guy like Tyler Haynes has done that, means a lot to us. And it gives our kids who are underclassmen confidence too, because you can prop up a guy like Tyler Haynes and say, listen, this guy's going to the next level, and you guys could do that too.
Yeah, certainly he can serve as a great model for some of the younger wrestlers. Well, you guys kick things off next week. Very exciting. I know you're excited. I know the wrestlers are as well. Coach Keagle, thanks for joining us today, and best of luck this season.
Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it.
All right, so for the Metuchen High School Media Club, the MHS Podcast, and the Bulldog Report, I'm Eddie Kalegi signing off of the first edition of Coach's Corner. Have a great rest of your night.
Once again, a thank you to Ben Selaski, Sarah Selaski, and Jada Victor Morse for helping us out with that interview. If you want to see more from the Bulldog Report, you can check it out by searching Bulldog Report on YouTube. There you can check out more of these interviews. And in addition, watch live streams of Metuchen High School athletic action. We did it in the fall, did it in the winter, continuing with wrestling and spring sports. So you can certainly go and check that out. So stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We have a whole other half of this show coming up. We'll start. Josh Hyman and I will be talking about all the latest in those Metuchen High School athletic programs, including a recap of the basketball season and how the swim team has adapted a virtual format to have competitions. Then we'll be joined by Mr. Stevens, a computer science and math teacher here, to talk about teacher appreciation and all the hard work they're doing. And then Itai Geller and I will be talking about the student experience being both at home and in person for school this year. Stay with us, more to come. This is the MHS Podcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Having trouble seeing the board in class? Do you need safety glasses for your school sport? If you answered yes to either of these questions, head over to Optique Unique, the eyeglass store at 406 Main Street in Metuchen. Optique Unique does it all. Not only do they offer eyewear for all ages, they also sell sports-specific safety glasses for kids and adults. Call them at 732-321-2020. That's 732-321-2020, or visit OptiqueUnique.com. Do you want to build character, build confidence, or even build yourself? All that and more can be accomplished at the Black Belt Institute at 23 New Street, right here in Metuchen. Students of all ages have been able to learn respect, discipline, fitness, and self-defense from their experienced instructors for over 20 years. Whether you're an adult looking for stress reduction or know someone young who has interest in Taekwondo, the Black Belt Institute is the place to go. The Institute takes a fun approach at teaching the rules of self-defense, instilling in their students an I-can-do-it attitude. Interested in taking a class? Call them at 732-205-9797 or visit their website at blackbeltinst.com. Once again, that's 732-205-9797 or blackbeltinst.com. The Black Belt Institute, Metuchen's leader in martial arts and fitness.
Welcome back to the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School. I'm Josh Hyman.
And I'm Itai Geller.
The winter sports season is over for some teams, while for others, like wrestling, the action is only beginning. The boys basketball team closed out 2021 on a high note, capturing their Haley Family Pod title. Who is key in their success, and how do they retool next season after the departure of 5 seniors?
Well, yeah, losing 5 seniors is going to be huge for this team, but we were both there. We got to witness this, and it was a nice moral victory, especially with how this team performed in their last few games. They had some tough losses. If you remember, they were 5-2. Then they lost 3 in a row to come back to 500, but they won on senior night in really impressive fashion against South River, coming back from a halftime deficit. And then they beat New Brunswick, revenge from 2 years ago when the New Brunswick Zebras beat them in the GMC tournament. And then, of course, in the pod final, they defeated Old Bridge, another team that is usually a staple, a strong program. Of course, both these teams had down years because of COVID and such, and they didn't play as many games as they had hoped. But nonetheless, these are established basketball programs from higher divisions in the GMC that Metuchen was able to make easy work of. Of course, Jai Dreher led the way for them in those last 3 games, and it led to him with this late season surge, really dominant inside. He had dunks in each of his last 4 games as a senior, which was really impressive to see. Of course, he had started dunking a little last year, but then made it a staple to happen at least once a game. But that helped him be named to the All-GMC Blue Division first team. Chiappa, Piavoso, and Schleck were all named to the second team. They were all very instrumental. Chiappa, coming back from injury early in the season, played really well. Piavoso, despite being a point guard, shot the ball well. And Luke Schleck, when Chiappa was out early in the season, really led the way for Metuchen's offense. Also of note, senior Logan Grice, really strong with a 3-point shot, had a couple of good games down the stretch for them. Aiden Ahmed, a junior, led the team in both assists and steals. Now, it's nice that things ended on this high note for this group. It really pays off in the end, but it was bittersweet to capture this title, but I don't know what to expect heading into next year. Chiappa, of course, is going to be really important, but Aiden Ahmed is going to have to play really well, especially he's going to have to score a little more too. Yes, he's a great defender. Yes, he's a great passer, but you're going to need to expect more in the scoring column from him. Likewise, you're going to need people like Max Cohn, Liam Benderly, Sam Kugwima, who did not get as much playing time because of all these seniors. They're going to have major roles next year. So I don't know what to expect from this Metuchen team next season, but it's nice that they ended it here with a championship for 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. They had an amazing run, and I think it is a shame that they have to lose so much talent next year. But I think Guy Jensen has really proved himself as a coach, taking this program and just elevating it to another level. So I think now with their next batch of juniors and seniors, and I think definitely somebody like Dom Chiappa is definitely going to have to take the reins of this team. He's got plenty of varsity experience. He was very competitive on this Metuchen team that was so stacked with seniors. So he has the experience, he has the skill, he has the competitive edge. I think he will be a great leader for this Metuchen team, and I think they're in good shape because, like you said, Max Cohn, Liam Benderly, Aiden Ahmed, they also have that varsity experience, and they played very well in the games we saw. So I think they are in a good position for next year and maybe the years to come because they have that depth on the bench from this year. And those kids who are, watching and playing and absorbing all the knowledge, all the information from this year's seniors, they're going to take that into next year, along with Coach Jensen's now championship experience. So I think it's looking very good for this boys basketball team. But now let's switch it up to the girls basketball team. They also had a really good season. Unfortunately, they lost the Flaherty Family Pod final, but like the boys, they finished with a 10-5 record. So how can this team come back and succeed as a more experienced group next winter?
Well, they can be excited about next winter because Chase Clavon is the only player who's leaving. They only had one senior this year. Of course, Clavon, her impact is huge on the court. She's a great shooter. She's also a great leader and has served as a team captain each of these last 2 years. But they have a lot of talented guards who will be coming up from the junior varsity level. You've got Leslie Flaherty, Sam Pfeiffer, Katie Gray, Mia Zapp, all played really well for a JV team that only lost 2 regular season games this year. So there's a lot of underclassmen that can come up and contribute on this girls team. Also, they can also be hopeful that they can get Zoe Brown or Marin Boucher back when it's a more normal pandemic year. Of course, Boucher, a senior, is focused a little more on, will be a senior next year. She focused on soccer this year and opted not to play. We'll see if she comes back. Zoe Brown, it was a difficult situation for her because she's a runner and she also plays basketball. She opted to go with the track team because, of course, the spring track season was kind of an extension of the winter season with it starting in February, and it bled into the basketball season, and she opted to go with track. So those two, we might see them back. Even if they're not back, there's a lot to be excited about next year. Molly Maleg is going to continue setting records. She got to 1,000 points this season for the girls as only a junior. Not many people can say they got to that mark in just 3 short years, and Maleg is one of those. Aurelie Germain, a forward, her and Carly Pachalski dominated down low. They had some issues with turnovers, but they were really strong and imposing, and as they get more experienced and they get taller, they'll play much better. Charlotte Breen, a point guard, also had a great year passing the ball, led the team second in steals, actually, in that category, behind just Molly Maleg. So, of course, it's centered around Maleg, but they're not going to be losing much next year. But the real challenge for this team will be recovering from the turnover issue because, Josh, we did a couple of girls' games together. We noticed, especially when they had leads, they would get a little careless with the ball, and we saw a lot of turnovers, and they weren't just bad passes either. There were a lot of travels. There were a lot of double dribbles. There was a lot of just stepping out of bounds, things that they're easy fixes. So this is something that Coach Glutz can really work on heading into next season, as she'll have almost the exact same roster back. One other challenge is defeating Middlesex because they averaged nearly 70 points per game this season against non-Middlesex teams. And then they were held below 50 in both contests against the Blue Jays. We know Middlesex is really good. They, before this shortened year, had won 23-plus games in 3 consecutive seasons. But if Metuchen can be at least somewhat competitive with this Middlesex team, they can enter the top 10 into the GMC Blue Division, not in the Blue Division, in the conference in general. They can be a top 10 team pretty easily and try to continue to move up and next year contend for a GMC title. They're going to have a lot of seniors next year with Sarah Knoll, Pachalski, and Maleg, just to name a few. So the girls can be really optimistic heading into next season when they'll finally, for the first time in a few years, have an experienced team out there.
Yeah, definitely. This girls team definitely not bit as hard by the senior bug as maybe the boys were. And they do have that leadership with Molly Maleg. You know, getting 1,000 points is hard enough as a junior. It's near impossible, never heard of, like you said. But I also think they do have players in pretty much every position that they can cultivate more and then just prepare more for the senior year. Such you said, Arlie, Jermaine, Breen, Pachalski, and Maleg herself, all in very good positions, all in different positions, and that's very important to have that experience. So I think they are going to be in a good spot. Like you said, this was a problem with the boys as well, with the sloppiness, with the turnovers. The nerves are especially a problem with this girls team. That is something that needs to be fixed. It is something that is very important. It does come with experience, but now a lot of these girls are going into their senior year, so this is going to be the time where they really prove themselves that they can separate themselves from the good players to the great players, because you can have all the skill, you can have all the knowledge, but you have to be able to perform. And unfortunately, a lot of these girls have had problems doing that. But like you said, it's nothing that Coach Glutz can't fix. So, there is a lot of hope going into this next season for the girls. So moving on to wrestling, the wrestling season begins March 17th against St. Thomas Aquinas. What can we expect from Coach Keagle and his team this season?
Well, of course, we just aired our interview with Coach Keagle where he kind of delved into it, but let me dive a little deeper here. So the boys last year, wrestling, they did really good. They were 6-1 in divisional competition. They are losing a couple of seniors from last year, including Elijah Irvin and Joshua Mateos, but nothing terrible because this is a core of seniors that we heard Coach Keagle allude to in our earlier interview. All these wrestlers that were with him that first year when they were freshmen, and it was his first year taking over this wrestling program. And this season, of course, like the winter sports, it's shortened. So just a little more background here. Like, the wrestling season might be separate from the winter season, but that's just to give more time for they hope the pandemic would die down a little bit so that they could feel more comfortable having a high contact indoor sport, because that's the only high contact indoor sport. We have intermediate contact ones like basketball and hockey, but wrestling, it is constant contact. So of course you have to be safe with that, but they've found a way, and they certainly found a way doing all these other winter sports like basketball and hockey, which we thought might have been problematic. And that didn't prove to be the case, at least in Metuchen. And hopefully wrestling can follow suit. But looking at their actual performance heading into the season, Tyler Haynes, Brandon Kick, Jaden Kearns, also Dean Serio, just some of the seniors that we can expect to be really competitive. Also sophomore Fran Rossiter, who had a really strong freshman season, getting some playing time with the varsity team. Should be exciting to see. Of course, a tough test getting started with St. Thomas Aquinas, but a lot of home meets to start the season, and only a 4-week season. Of course, there's not much room for error, but we know Coach Keagle's a great coach. He's able to motivate his wrestlers, And despite it being moved back a few months, honestly, I think that helps the chances of us getting through this wrestling season unscathed. And we know Metuchen so far has had a lot of success with their winter sports team staying safe. So hopefully that has set the precedent that we'll see the same thing with this wrestling season. And hopefully they can perform really well this season as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Eddie. I think it's great that the wrestling team is going to have a season. Like you said, it is one of those riskier activities, but it is good that the league and the school have been able to work something out. Now, going back over to the players, I think this team is ready to go. You know, you have the wrestlers working out since, early January as fast as they can. Their wrestlers are already out after school running, doing weight training, getting ready for the season. We see them during track practice. They're doing laps. They're doing longer runs. They're doing, aerobics, anaerobic exercises. They're very much getting prepared. They've been ready for months now. And, I think Tyler Haynes is especially going to be a really important leader on this team. Like you said, he's already going to college for wrestling, which is very impressive. And, they've got a great group of guys here and a great coach, really motivated, ready to go. You may not see a lot of other teams who have been preparing for months now because of the pandemic. A lot of teams, they might think they can go easy or they can just walk in there and start getting acclimated. But, especially with a season like wrestling where strength and body weight and cardio are just so paramount to the sport, you have to get ready so many months in advance or else you're not going to be able to succeed. But it seems like this Metuchen team is really getting ready in all the right places.
Yeah, totally. And at the same time, too, the one challenge that I just wanted to mention here is that these guys haven't wrestled in 13 months. It's been over a year since the last season finished. And of course, no scrimmages because just trying to limit the number of times you're interacting with other teams. So they've had to really prepare. The one thing that's a benefit that actually when I talked to Mr. Keagle last year, there's so many wrestlers that are 2-sport, 3-sport athletes, especially a lot of them were on the football team. That was another high contact sport that they played fairly recently and they dealt with during a pandemic. So not only do they understand now playing a sport during a pandemic and what that entails, but also they've gotten that strengthening and conditioning practice actually in game form, not just going to the weight room. Of course, a weight room is beneficial, but actually getting to exercise that on a field or a mat or a court is most important in terms of getting ready. So hopefully that has helped to prepare them for this wrestling season. But I want to talk to you a little about track because to my knowledge, you guys have had a couple of smaller meets, but are starting to prepare for some bigger ones as we approach the spring as well.
Yeah, that's right, Eddie. We've had 3 meets so far. 1 meet on Saturday, 2 during the week, and we've done very well. There's a very promising freshman class, especially in the long distance runs, such as the mile and the 800. We're seeing from freshmen a lot of low 5-minute miles, such as 5:14, 5:12, and it's really good to see. A lot of the freshmen were very enthusiastic during the shoveling. They worked hard. They got right on task and weren't distracted, which is always a great sign. Like I said, that shoveling activity is pretty much a litmus test for the attitudes of some of the kids you're going to have. And it's really good to see that they're continuing the tradition of working hard and getting out there in the cold, miserable wind and, just getting to task and not really complaining about it. So it's really good to see, we got a lot of new sprinters, a lot of new mid-distance runners that are already seeing vast improvements, cutting their times down seconds on end. And the throwing team is also doing well. We have 3 new kids this year, 2 freshmen, 1 senior, and they're already getting acclimated to the sport and are really enthusiastic about it. So we have really good news coming from this track team, and we have a meet coming up tomorrow at home against 2 other schools. So we're getting into it. We're in the swing of things. The spring season is going to start sometime in April, which is pushed back. It's usually start April 1st. It's going to be in late April to start now. But, track is in full swing now. So that's really good to see that we were able to get our seasons in.
Yeah, and I've also heard how the spring season right now, everything is still in plan for the typical spring season with GMCs and sectionals. So great to hear that those things are happening. And also about the work ethic, because we know from Coach Halloran, he cares about toughness and agility, and these athletes really giving their best effort. And especially this year, there was a lot of uncertainty, especially with these freshmen, about how much work ethic people were going to really put in, because this last year, of course, has been so unique, so unprecedented. And let's be honest, like, in school, for example, we might not be doing our best work right now. Things might be a little more laid back, especially if you're doing school completely from home. But the fact that these new freshmen have been able to assimilate so well with the track team is a really good sign. But yeah, so I think that's really great to hear. And it's nice to see that the track team has been able to get things going through this little bit of a weird winter season. Not really much of a winter season. This has really been a winter training period for you guys, but getting a 3-month full typical spring track season underway very soon has to be great to hear.
Yeah, it's really good to feel and hear, especially because a lot of sports have been disrupted by the pandemic. And despite some holdup, the swim team has been creative and has been able to participate in some competitive meets. How have they been doing?
Yeah, so they've been doing pretty well. They won their first 3 meets. Now, last time we did a sports segment, this was a few weeks ago, there was still uncertainty about how this was going to work, but I know there was a swim Zoom that actually, when I was broadcasting one of the games, the AD John Cathcart was part of, trying to plan how they can do this, and they have started with some meets. So this is what's happening. There are these virtual meets that have been happening where you have one team swimming at one pool, Metuchen obviously at the YMCA, and then their opponent is at another pool, and then there are officials sent, a couple to each pool, and then they keep track of the times, and then they total everything together, and then they determine a winner and get all the points together. So the fact that they've been able to do it, of course, unconventional, but very creative, like you said, and the fact that they've been able to get some competition in. We didn't really think this was going to happen for the swim team, but of course, the swim team, always very successful here. They have a lot of seniors, and they're doing well with the boys, Alan Sia, Alex Liu. With the girls, Bridget Thomas, who's a Towson commit, and Kira Stolarski, all swimming really well, and they're 3-0. They've got wins over JFK and South Plainfield, who usually have pretty strong swimming programs. But once again, Metuchen swimming on top, even though they've had to change things up so much.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear about the virtual meet system. Swim is one of those sports where, you might not want to have too many people around, especially in our current situation. You don't want people in crowded spaces and sharing the water together. But, fortunately, it seems like it is one of those sports where you can kind of adapt to the situation. You can't do a long distance soccer game. You can't do a virtual football game, but, it's really cool to see that you can do these virtual swim meets. So, this unexpected time of the pandemic has been a great way to highlight the ingenuity and creativity of these school programs, such as their teams, the clubs, the school itself. And it's really cool to see how people are really trying hard to get a season in, no matter what's going on. And switching it up to the team now, this is a team where for the last few years, like I've said, we expect excellence, we expect a victory even from these swimmers, and especially with the seniors such as Alan Shaw, Alex Liu, and Bridget Thomas. They're 4 years, they're ready to go. They were already performing so well, so they're going to have to lead the team this season, and I think they are very much ready to do that. So we should expect some great things from the swim team going forward.
Yeah, and swimming really lends itself to this format as well, because I don't think, I'd argue that there's another sport at the high school that you could do in a virtual format. Of course, when it's one team against another, soccer, basketball, baseball, football, of course, that's not possible. But I'd say even with track in a way, especially with running, because if it's, for example, 8 runners going around the track, especially in a relay, you're motivated by what you're seeing and who you're up against, and if you're behind or ahead. When it's swimming, of course, track in some ways is an independent sport there, but with swimming, you are so laser focused. When you're in the water, you can't really tell what's going on with the people you're against. You're just focused on doing the best possible for yourself. And I feel like regardless of the format, whether you're in person or you're doing it in this way virtually, you're still getting that same experience, and it's really not affecting your performance. But great to see all this going on. And of course, next time when we come back from spring break, we'll be previewing all of the spring sports coming up, along with all the latest in wrestling, swimming, and track. So for Josh Hyman, I'm Itai Geller. Let's move on now to our final interview. We'll be talking to Mr. Stevens about teacher appreciation. Continuing here on the Metuchen High School podcast, the online radio voice of MHS, I'm Itai Geller. The week of May 3rd is recognized nationally as Teachers Appreciation Week, and it seems to hold special meaning this year with the unique work teachers have had to do to adapt to the situation at hand due to COVID-19. To talk about it, it's great to be joined right now by MHS Math and Computer Science teacher, Mr. Stevens. Thanks for coming on.
Good to be here.
So, what have been some of the most difficult changes and adaptations that you and other teachers have had to make this year?
Wow. I mean, to me, number one is simply not having many students in school. So that, I mean, that's just been a huge adjustment. If you go back to say January, we were getting like 45 students in the high school a day, and we're up now. I was just told today we were up to 128. So, we've made progress, but just not having teenagers around and instead talking to a computer all day, that is a huge adjustment. I've never even met most of my students once, because of course most students have been remote at the high school anyway, the whole year. So I've never even personally met most of the people that I've been teaching, and now it's mid-March. So that is, of course, very awkward. It's way below ideal. I mean, people go into teaching because they like people. They like people. They like working with kids, and this is just a very different kind of working with kids that is inferior to what we usually do. I have heard from some teachers also that their workload has definitely increased just with everything being on the computer. So that's true for me as well. For example, if I'm going to give a quiz, I can't just go down and make some photocopies or whatever and then hand it out. Basically, I've been digitizing them, right? Which means constructing them in Google Forms, and that takes time. That's definitely more time consuming than just making 15 copies in the faculty workroom.
Definitely. And circling back to what you said about these students that you haven't even met in person. I mean, I'm a senior. At least I've had the experience for the past 3 years of normal school in person. It's very difficult, especially for freshmen, for those who still have not actually been in the high school building yet for school, who are still trying to figure out this high school process and have been doing everything digitally. But what are some of the strategies that you've employed and you and other teachers have tried to try to make it easier, especially when you're in situations where you're teaching? Sometimes everybody's at home, other times there's some at home and some in school.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I have not really tried to teach both to kids who are at home and kids who are at school at the same time. And probably I'm a bad teacher because I really haven't tried to do that. In other words, when I do have 3 or 4 students in a classroom, I will say to them, you should get onto Zoom. And then I'm teaching on Zoom to them, and then to, whatever it is, 15, 18, 20 people who are at home. So as I said, I'm probably a bad teacher that way because I'm not doing much different for the people who are in school. Of course, I can walk over to them and I can help them with whatever it is that they're doing in a way that I can't, with the people at home. So I mean, I think they get a different experience, but still, in terms of if we're covering material, if we're having a discussion with some lecture, they're getting the same experience that the kids at home. In terms of strategies, gosh, I don't know. I use breakout rooms. I think everybody probably uses breakout rooms. So especially in the computer classes, if someone has a problem where they want to show me something they've completed, we'll go into a breakout room and I'll either answer questions or check them off for whatever it is they've completed. So I mean, that's a wonderful part of Zoom that I think a lot of teachers have taken advantage of. I don't know. I just try to be as clear as possible coming over the computer screen, with whatever it is that we're discussing or that I'm presenting. I try to be as clear as I can.
Yeah, and I mean, it's certainly a challenge just trying to balance things. And you're not alone. There are a lot of other classes like that I have that if there are students there in person, it just is not necessarily just a convenience aspect either. Like sometimes it's better for a class for everybody to be on the same page doing the same thing and all be together, whether they're in person or at home. And having everybody on Zoom sometimes allows for that to happen. But you mentioned at the beginning how the number of students that are in school is starting to rise. We were up to 128 students this week, and it dropped down into the 40s for a while. And of course, recently, Dr. Caputo has created the opportunity for teachers to schedule their first vaccination appointments and trying to get some of the teachers up the list. Do you think that allowing this to happen and hopefully get the ball rolling will get more students into school here before the school year is over?
You talking about just at the high school?
Yeah, I'm focusing on the high school.
My guess is that not many students are staying home because the teachers are not yet vaccinated. And of course, as you say, those vaccinations are starting to happen, but I don't think that is a major factor for most students. I mean, I think there's probably two things, and you could probably, I know you're interviewing me, but you could probably shed light on this. I think there's a fear of COVID, which is a genuine reason, obviously, to want to stay out of a public school. And then there's a convenience factor, right? It's more convenient to stay home. You can literally almost stay in your pajamas if you wanted to. And there's also this social aspect. If you went to school and there's 50 students in the school and your friends aren't among them, and you're walking around with a mask on and you're socially distanced, it's just not as much fun as high school is really supposed to be in terms of seeing your friends. So people sort of, I think, to some extent stay home because that social component is not completely missing, but largely missing, just because there's so few people at school. I don't think you just getting vaccinated is going to bring a lot more people back to the school. Is my short answer to that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because of course the one benefit to this is that it will make teachers who have that fear of COVID-19 infections feel more comfortable being in the school, especially when there are other students there. Of course, there's other factors involved there as well, but you kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to students. Like personally for me, I went to school the first 2 days that I was eligible, but a lot of my friends went then. But then after that, and after the first COVID-19 infections that we saw from high school staff members, we went home, and we've realized, like, being in person right now, for example, in 5 of my 7 classes, there's either 1 or 0 people in class in person on any given day. So there's really not much of a socialization benefit being there, especially when all of my friends are at home. So I can definitely see from that. But hopefully with teachers getting the vaccination, it can instill more confidence in the teachers themselves that they can be, a little safer when they're in the school building. But last thing I wanted to talk about is the lasting changes. Of course, we've seen how useful technology can be in a situation like this when we have to revert to online school. But once everything is back to normal, how do you think education will be changed in the long term from what we've experienced during this pandemic?
Well, one kind of small way that it might be changed is, if you noticed, we had some major snowstorms this winter, right? And we did not have a single snow day, right? We did remote early dismissal days, right? We did like 8:30 to 12:30 kind of a thing on those days. Under normal conditions, we would have probably had 3 snow days, which we then would have made up in June, according to the current calendar. So one question, which I don't think has been answered yet, is if in the future, when COVID is basically in the rearview mirror, will we have snow days? Because we've already demonstrated that we have the technology that we don't have to have snow days. We could have remote school and everybody could just log onto their computers. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty small way, but that's certainly one way that that education could change. I think in terms of meetings, I think meetings might happen more over the computer, because we've realized how convenient it is to say, okay, the meeting's at 3:15, here's the Zoom link, and everybody, wherever they are, just gets on their laptop or their desktop. I'm not sure that's going to totally go away. Even if you're talking about just driving across Metuchen to get to the central office, it's still going to be kind of a tantalizing idea that you could just log onto Zoom and not have to spend as much time sort of getting around to get to the meeting. So we'll time will tell, but I think that in-person education at the high school and the other schools, that's obviously going to come back, and that's what everybody wants. But I think that the meetings that take place could stay online to a considerable degree.
Yeah, well, everything has changed, and the teachers have done a great job and have been unsung heroes throughout this pandemic in having to balance in person, at home, a little bit of both, and of course, completely changing the way that they convey education to their students. And us students are very appreciative of all the work that the teachers are doing. So, Mr. Stevens, thanks so much for joining us, and best of luck through the rest of the school year.
Thanks a lot, Eddie.
Wrapping up today's edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, Eddie Kalegi here alongside Itai Geller. Well, we've already talked about it. We had the coalition on who were talking about the virtual schooling, and we just talked to Mr. Stevens, who has talked about balancing between virtual and in-person. But Itai, you've actually been going to school in person. So I went for the first 2 days back in September, but I imagine it's a little different now, almost 6 months after that. So could you tell me a little bit about your experiences with that?
Yeah, I feel a lot of things have definitely changed in person as of right now. I also did go in when they introduced the hybrid mode. And at the time, I admit I didn't enjoy it a lot because there weren't a lot of people in school, and overall things were very strict regarding the hallway policy and, the cafeteria. But things have changed a lot now. I feel like things are a little more relaxed. There's definitely a lot more students attending, and it feels, a little more, similar to what we used to have before the pandemic started. Definitely, still the same situation with the lunchrooms, or, you're separated from other students, and it's still very restrictive, but to a point where it's, loosened up a little bit.
Yeah, and I also think now that people kind of understand how to handle school, like as time has gone on, of course, sometimes even with this, you can tend to be a little over precautious, but now I think they've started to realize, and even as more students are starting to come back, as Mr. Stevens alluded to, it was down to 45 students. Now it's up over 120. So at least there's a little more of the student body there. I'm curious, just your decision to continue to attend school in person. Why do you prefer that rather than being online?
That's a great question. I admit that sometimes I did feel more comfortable with online learning, just the environment, but that's obviously very different for some people. What really makes me want to come back to school is the social aspect of it. And I've definitely sort of adjusted to, a quieter classroom where there's less conversation. But for me, going in person just feels a lot more normal. And it gives you this, it's really a good feeling to, feel like things are, slowly starting to go back to the way they were.
Yeah, and for me, I sort of want to go back in May, and at least as a senior kind of finish things out when it's a little more normal. And of course, things are starting to become safer with cases going down, vaccinations going up, of course, teachers receiving the vaccines over these next few weeks. So definitely some positive signs with that. So I'm curious then on the other side, your opinions on any, of course, you've had experiences being virtual for school. What are some things that you feel like in those times when you were home that you felt like were working and some things that were not?
Yeah. So for sure, when you're in school, you have a lot more access to your teachers. I think that's something that is really important to stress, especially for a lot of the incoming classes. Like, for the younger kids, for the freshmen, it's really important that you interact with your teachers. That's something that was definitely lacking in the remote learning setting. Although I know for a fact that a lot of my teachers were trying to make it more accessible for students, with offering like extra office hours or breakout rooms, right? And they've done a great job.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I feel like the toughest thing being online is trying to make a class interactive because it's so easy to just mute your mic and not say anything. And when you're in class, you don't have that luxury. But we know teachers have tried to adapt the best they can to try to make things work. But obviously, junior year, of course, I experienced it last year. It's very different, at least from your first 2 years in high school, because, of course, if you're taking AP classes, also you're thinking about potentially learning to drive and getting your license. It's a real milestone year. So what would you say so far for junior year has been your biggest challenge and just something you're looking forward to heading into your senior year?
Oh, it's got to be staying motivated for sure. When you've been, in high school for the first 2 years, you start to sort of lack this push to, continue working hard, especially in junior year where you're faced with a lot of challenges and adversities. Like, you have to study for the SAT, learning how to drive, as you mentioned, handling all your AP classes. It's, it can get stressful. I think that that's something that I definitely feel like I've started to adjust to at this point. Actually, I feel more accomplished than I did for the last 2 years because I have a feeling that if I continue to push forward, right, through, all of these challenges, hopefully in the end, there will be a big reward of some sort, So I would, encourage others, especially underclassmen, to continue to stay positive, have a positive outlook, especially for the future when you enter junior year.
Yeah, and like for my words as a senior, especially if you're an underclassman, your senior year will be a lot more normal than mine currently is, but still there's a lot to look forward to coming up on the horizon. And of course, for like freshmen, I preached this during peer leadership with the freshmen. Like, there's so many fun things that you get to do with the high school. Yeah, you're not getting that full experience right now, but when that time comes, and it will be coming very soon, you can enjoy what the high school has to offer. The diverse array of clubs, which, by the way, are still happening, but it's more difficult to find out that type of information. That's really what we're trying to provide here. But aside from that, of course, with sports, with other events like Battle of the Classes and Snowball and Homecoming, those will all be coming back. And you might be a little pessimistic right now. And I mean, who isn't? But looking down the line, things could certainly be getting better soon. But that's going to just about wrap up today's show. A thank you to Itai and our other contributors, Julia Hirschfield and Josh Hyman, and of course our guests today, Mr. Stevens, Mayor Jonathan Busch, and Mr. Keagle, and also to our advisor, Ms. Wisniewski. We hope everybody has a great spring break, and we'll be back in April. Itai Geller here on the Metuchen High School Podcast signing off. This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.